Tottenham Hotspur 2, Manchester United 2. One of those games which, as the early kickoff, never really got going. And for both teams, this feels like a massive, massive opportunity missed. 2 points probably dropped for both sides. Let's take a look at what happened and what went wrong, really, for United. So let's start off with Manchester United's approach out of possession, because I think particularly in big away games, this is really important. It's a great moment to see the ideas that the manager is sort of coming into the game with. Are we being defensive? Are we being aggressive? Are we being something in between? And to start off with, on restart situations, United were being relatively aggressive. So a restart situation is something like a goal kick, for example. So not when the ball's in open play, but the ball's gone behind for a goal kick, Vicario gets the ball, and everyone stops for a second and picks up their new starting position. This is a great opportunity to see what United are trying to do. And largely, United attempted to be relatively aggressive in these moments. We tried to press as high up the pitch as we could. So Cunha and Mbeumo would often become a bit of a front two, or it could be Cunha and Ahmad swinging this way. Mazraoui was actually, somewhat connected with the press as well in this moment. When we saw the lineup, I was a little bit worried that he was going to be deep, but he wasn't. He was connected. And Bruno Fernandes was sort of responsible for picking up two players in this position here. And essentially what would happen is the ball would go one way. So let's say Van de Ven gets the ball, so the ball goes from Vicario to Van de Ven. Ahmad's going to apply pressure, so Bruno Fernandes will follow Sarr, and United will try and lock to that side of the pitch. Or if the ball comes the other way, like this, Cunha would come across and Mbeumo would come across, and now Bruno Fernandes would come across onto Palhinha, and once again the team sort of locks off one way. This is what United were trying to do. We did it with a relatively decent intensity. There were a couple of moments where we were able to overturn the ball quite high, and on another day, potentially we turn that into something more dangerous. But I wouldn't say it was something that we did that regularly. And as I've sort of hinted at a couple of times, this was only really on restarts at goal kicks. In open play, I felt that United were quite passive and somewhat standoffish. So in open play, there's sort of this brief moment where Manchester United look like they might be in a 4-4-2, like this, with De Ligt almost shifting to right back. But what quickly happens is Mazraoui just sort of drops off a little bit deeper into the back five. And we expect that when we see Mazraoui in the starting 11 because he's a fullback. So he is someone that instinctively always plays a little bit deeper. And I think that was why he was picked for this game. Ruben Amorim knows that United aren't quite as good away from home as what we are at home. He knows that we can't be as dominant, that we can't use the crowd as much to feed off of. So he is a bit more cautious with his team selection, right? We see Harry Maguire come into the team, which tends to tell us that we're going to be a little bit more passive. We saw Mazraoui come into the team as a wing-back, as opposed to Ahmad playing in this position. And that means that United are going to drop off a little bit deeper. Now, this isn't necessarily the end of the world. At the end of the day, the most important thing to do in football is to try and get a result. And Amorim obviously felt that the best way to get a result was to go away from home, was to be compact, was to get lots of players behind the ball. It's not how I like to see the game played. I would like to see United on the front foot being aggressive, but United sort of set Spurs the challenge of trying to move through United. And for large parts, Spurs couldn't, and that's because United defended pretty well. So what we often saw was Richarlison for Spurs. He started as sort of like a left winger, but he would come inside the pitch closer to De Ligt, and Spence would fly forward down the left side. In this moment, Spurs almost start to build possession, a little bit more in a back three, with Porro sort of being tucked on the right-hand side. Now, he's quite an attacking player, so he's always looking to stride forward when he can. But they sort of become this back three, which almost sort of lined up quite nicely with United's front three. So it's almost, potentially we could go man-to-man. We sort of could jump in certain moments. We know that we've got the midfielders that could also back it up as well. And then Luke Shaw was responsible for Xavi Simons. Now, in this moment, you can see that United are pretty much man-to-man. Luke Shaw, in particular, really responsible for helping United when Simons dropped deeper. He's the sort of player, Simons, who likes to come towards the ball. He wants to overload the play where he can. And Shaw would go with him. But this didn't feel consistent. There were moments where, the back five's got one each. They've got to pick up their player. When they go out, they've got to jump. So if Richarlison drops deeper, De Ligt goes with him. And he did a very good job. But there were moments where it felt a little bit disconnected, or it felt like we could be pulled about a little bit. For example, if Luke Shaw can be pulled out, there is an obvious gap there. And Harry Maguire is not the man with the athleticism or the mobility to really deal with this. Fortunately, Spurs weren't very good. Spurs were quite poor on the ball for large parts of the game. The likes of Sarr and Palhinha sort of struggled to come up with solutions for Spurs on the ball. So largely, United weren't too tested in this part of the game. And realistically for Spurs, The bigger threat was the wide zones, and what they were trying to do is just get quick early crosses into the box. That seemed to be the Spurs game plan for the first hour of the game, was to take a touch, get a cross in. United had Maguire this week, which always makes us stronger in the box. It makes us better at dealing with those moments. And for most of the game, United defended well, if not slightly passively. So now to talk about United on the ball. At the end of the day, we scored 2 goals, so we must have done something in possession to carry a threat. We've got Bruno Fernandes, we've got Mbeumo, we've got Amad, we've got Cunha. We are always going to carry something on the ball. Our player quality at this football club is insane. It is off the charts. So many good players in this Manchester United squad. And of course, we saw this week a slightly different balance, a slightly different dynamic going on. First of all, 2 fullbacks at wing-back. We're used to seeing Amad over here, but this was Mazraoui, so something a little bit different. A right-footed player playing on the right-hand side. We also saw Dorgu, a left-footed player playing on the left-hand side. And this almost simplified a little bit some of the wide dynamics for Manchester United. We also saw Mbeumo on the left and Amad on the right, which again is very different. Last week we were complaining about the fact that down this side of the pitch, particularly here, last week United had 3 right-footed players. This week now suddenly 2 of them are left-footed, which is going to change how United move the ball forward. And I think some of the combination work down this side was really quick and actually really good. There were moments where we would squeeze the ball into Mbeumo, and because he's left-footed, but also drawing Porro, it sort of opens up for this space. Dorgu can go into it, but because Mbeumo's left-footed as opposed to right-footed, that pass is just easier for him. And if not easier, perhaps quicker. And the ball is just going to bend a little bit nicer for the player to run onto. Sometimes when we see a right-footed player in this position, the ball arches away from goal. The ball arches towards goal and then away from goal, which for the player receiving isn't always great. For the left-footed player on this pass, it arches away and then comes back in. Is what we tend to see. And for Dorgu, that was excellent, because Dorgu's left-footed. That means he can get himself into this great position in the final third. Because of the left-footed dynamic from United on this side, Dorgu can rush into this position. The ball is on his left foot. Because he's received it from a left-footed passer, he receives the ball on his left foot. He doesn't really need to look up. He's just got to get a ball into the box. The problem was, United didn't really have anyone in there. There was a lack of numbers in that position. We anticipated before the game United would be able to cross. But with no Šeško, there was never quite that focal point in the box that you need. In an ideal world, you almost now would have had Mbeumo on the far side again to sort of attack the box. Amad was a bit more hesitant to do so. We know that Cunha isn't sort of He's not a player who sniffs out a chance in the 6-yard box. He's someone who comes a little bit deeper towards the ball. So this was a bit of a problem for United. Some of the work down this side was excellent. Some of it was an up back through, for example. So the up pass, the back pass, and then the through pass gets United into a great position. The problem was we just lacked anyone in there to then quickly play to. And aside from that quick wide dynamic, I never really felt like United were throwing too many punches. This wasn't a game where we had a lot of shots. It's not like we missed loads of good opportunities, apart from a couple for Benjamin Šeško. But that was late on. Sort of for the first 70 minutes, it was really cagey. It was 2 teams that sort of seem better when they don't have the ball, when they can play with less possession and they can be compact, not pressing too high, but being, close to each other, difficult to break down. That seemed to be what Spurs wanted to do, and also United. And that always creates a very weird football match where it never quite gets going, and it felt like that for large parts. I still think United should score another goal in this game. I think with the positions we get into, the opportunities we create, I think United should get another goal in this game. And the one sort of positive, the one sort of bit of credit I will give Amorim for this game is he did solve this left side problem, because last week it really was an issue. This week he did find a way to get different profiles down this side, and it instantly made us more dangerous. I haven't seen our left side this dangerous in a long, long time. And I think on the right side, Amad was also absolutely fantastic. Cunha had a poor one up front, and Šeško wasn't great when he came on either, which sort of stunted us a little bit. So, yeah, credit for Amorim for almost solving that left side problem, but it left us with a problem in the middle, and we, like I said, never really felt like we were causing Spurs a lot of problems, and that's reflected really in our lack of shots. Now, just the final thing that I wanted to touch on was the subs. Now, we don't normally put too much focus on this, but because this was a fairly event-free match, I feel like we can talk about the subs a bit more. And we saw a lot of them in this game. United used all 5 of them, which actually came back to bite us. That happens sometimes. It's unfortunate in football. The first change we saw was Mazraoui coming off the pitch with Benjamin Šeško. And this happens with United 1-0 up. Start of the second half, Spurs come out quite quick. We're putting United under pressure. Again, a lot of early crosses. pushing United onto the back foot. United were very deep defensively. I was quite excited by the substitute. To see Ahmad move to wing-back and Šeško come on up front, you know, it was an aggressive sub. We've seen Amorim in the past be too defensive to, bring on an extra fullback in this position. But I felt initially he was actually quite aggressive with the change that he made. I felt like he was trying to get us onto the front foot, which I liked. What was interesting was that Cunha still played on the right and Mbeumo on the left. If it was me, I would have swapped over at that point. Cunha wasn't having much joy in this game. I would have liked to have seen them moved about in these positions here rather than Cunha playing over here, getting back in his natural position. We didn't do that. A couple of the other subs we saw, made us weaker physically. There's no doubt about that. Harry Maguire, a forced substitute, but still one that we made. Lenny Yoro coming on is not as good with his box defence as what Maguire is. We saw Casemiro come off for Ugarte, not as good at protecting and defending his box as what Casemiro is. Dorgu off for Dalot. I think Dorgu had a very good game. And then Dalot coming on for him, just perhaps a little bit weaker. I can't even remember who Mason Mount came on for. So Mount was in fact on for Cunha. I completely forgot about what that sub was. Of course, a little bit later in the game. In theory, I didn't mind the United subs because if you look at it, you think Yoro's a bit better at defending bigger spaces. You think Ugarte's a bit more tenacious, a bit more intense. You've got Ahmad at wing-back, who's an attacker, and you've got the energy of Mount. To me, this sort of sent a signal that actually now we've got an opportunity late on in the game to get back on the front foot and to go back at Spurs. But it just didn't quite materialise, and I'd be interested to hear why you think that is. In theory, in practice, the subs we made were quite attacking. They were players which suggested that we actually almost wanted to play the game 20 yards higher up the pitch. But that didn't really happen. We actually continued to defend quite deep, which is then a problem because we had Ahmad and Yoro at the back post again. We've got Ugarte trying to defend his box, which he's not very good at doing. So it was a bit weird how the subs played out. I sort of liked the idea behind them in the sense that we could get on the front foot, but we didn't. And I'd like to hear why you think that was. Overall, I really do think it's a bit of a weird result for United and a weird performance and a weird one to reflect upon. Ultimately, a draw away against one of the traditional top six isn't bad at all, especially when you're 2-1 down with 10 men. Scoring late and getting a draw is a fantastic result. At the same time, it feels like 2 points dropped because it feels like we missed a really big opportunity. Spurs were not good today. Neither were United, let's make that clear. Which is why it's annoying. I don't think Spurs are a very good team at the moment. We said that in the tactical preview. So I felt that if United were good, we would beat Spurs, which is why it's so frustrating. This was a very winnable game, and we didn't win it. However, having said that, at the same time, we showed the resilience and the fortitude to make sure that we got a point, which is important in football. If you can't play well, draw. I always feel that. If you can't play well enough to win a game, if you play badly, make sure you take a point out of it so you're at least getting something from the day, from the effort, from the work. And United did do that. We extend the unbeaten run to 5 games. But I can't help but feel that it was all a bit too flat. I really don't think there is anything else to talk about from this match, so I am going to pass that over to you guys now to get into the comments down below and let me know what you think. What did United do well? Did you enjoy some of the wide work, particularly down the left? But also, what did we do poorly? What do we still need to work on? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But apart from that, we are now finished for today. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.